Project 2025. Let's check it out. All right, Project 2025 is a big policy document published by the American Heritage Foundation. Now, this is a group that was instrumental in and really wanted Donald Trump to win the election in 2024. So, this is a policy roadmap for what we can expect in the Donald Trump administration. Many of the officials in the Donald Trump administration are now saying, yes, this is the roadmap we're going to follow. Yes, this is what we want to do. And many of the key posts are already being filled by authors of this document, proponents of this document, and those who tried to make the things that this document says should happen, those that tried to make it happen last time around. So let's get started. Here it is. This is the Mandate for Leadership, the Conservative Promise 2025. This is Project 2025. If we start at page 133, there we go, we can see this is the chapter having to deal with the Department of Homeland Security. Okay, now the Department of Homeland Security is the administrative bureaucracy, the agency, the executive agency that houses USCIS, ICE, and the other branches that mostly deal with immigration. There are others, but these are the main ones. Now, we can tell the tone of this document is just so in love with immigration. As you can read right here, it's been a disaster. It's the Biden administration's fault. That's essentially what they're saying. And their first proposal is to blow up DHS. Say it's gotten too big, it's bloated, it doesn't make any sense anymore. They've lost track of what their mission truly is. So the only thing to do with it is dismantle it and reassign everything and put all the stuff that has to do with immigration in one massive super agency for immigration. Okay, now this is a great idea probably. I don't know. I mean, the way that the laws are written right now are so that everything works in this way. It is a bit of a mess. If we're being honest, I don't know if any immigration professional out there can say, oh, immigration's so efficient and cost effective and it just makes sense how it all works. No, any honest immigration attorney will tell you the whole system is kind of a mess. But to fix it, you can't just administratively change a bunch of stuff. You need to essentially start from the ground up. You need a new statute. You need a new Immigration and Nationality Act to handle that sort of conglomeration that you need to fix the many problems that immigration has. And if we're also being honest, those who were writing this document don't really have efficiency and productivity and the best for immigrants in mind, or immigration professionals, when they wrote this, and you'll see why in a little bit. All right, but that's the primary recommendation is here. DHS is a mess, break it up, get rid of it, send the different parts of the organizations to all the immigration related ones to an immigration one and divide up the rest. So, I mean, one way or another, yeah, that would be a good idea, but they're pretty scant on the details there. Okay, they do want to privatize the Transportation Security Administration. So when you're going through the airport, you're dealing with TSA, they want to privatize that. I know that's a lot of conservatives' dream to privatize airport security. Does it make sense? Doesn't it make sense? I mean, I'm sure there's a policy argument and debate to be had about that. Looking at it from the outside, I would say nobody likes TSA. That's probably fairly certain. But it does have to do with national security. And when you privatize something, it's best to privatize something that a private industry is not really good at or capable of doing, or where there's a risk for, when it's privatized, to just get more of it, right? So if we privatize the TSA, are we going to see now 3 different levels of security to go through instead of 1? What happens to, what's it called? TSA PreCheck. What happens to global entry? What happens to all these other things that privately exist? Now, I know there's private companies out there chomping at the bit, right? You got these Clear Choice companies, this Clear Choice that'll they'll walk you through the screening line and you get some priority treatment. So for sure, there's private companies just excited to get their hands on a government contract for this. But I don't know that that's the best idea. You know, we could debate that. It doesn't have much to do with actual immigration. So let's keep scrolling. Here we go. Some complaints about FEMA. Office of the Secretary. Okay, so this document here, this chapter was written by Ken Cuccinelli. Ken Cuccinelli was appointed to take over USCIS. However, a court found that his appointment as acting director of USCIS violated the Federal Vacancies Filling Act. So there's a federal statute that says if the head of the department leaves and you replace him with an acting director, that acting director has to meet certain requirements. They have to have been at a certain level in that department already. They have to have some seniority. They have to have experience, etc. Ken Cuccinelli didn't. So Donald Trump violated the law when he appointed him to that position. But since there's no police officer to remove Ken Cuccinelli from his position to which he was unlawfully appointed, instead, private groups sued the government, immigration attorney groups and other nonprofits sued the government and said, hey, this guy doesn't have any authority because the statute says if you violate these procedures in appointing a director, everything they do loses the force of law. So any policy memo that he wrote was automatically rescinded when the court found that he was unlawfully appointed. And that comes across in his chapter here where he talks about the office of the secretary. So what they want to do is they want to get rid of the requirements of the Federal Vacancies Act. They want to just let a political appointee be able to take over USCIS, to be able to take over DHS on a moment's notice. So right now, they would have to pass the appointment process. They'd be appointed by the president, approved by the Senate, with the advice and consent of the Senate. They want to skip that. So that sort of takes away one of the safeguards that the founders of the United States put in place when they designed the Constitution. So they want to have an unconstitutional authority to put their own political appointees in over people who actually have experience in the department. That could be dangerous. Now, since the Republicans control the House, the Senate, the presidency, and have a favorable majority on the Supreme Court, this may be a non-issue, but that's what they want, more political appointees, so they can have, like they say here, an aggressive approach to Senate-confirmed leadership positions. Okay, so this whole thing with actings, they want an acting director to be able to have full regulatory authority, to change everything, to do everything that a regular head of DHS or USCIS could do. And that stems from Ken Cuccinelli getting slapped by the Supreme Court. All right, or by the federal court system anyway. Political line of succession, of course they want that. Now, they talk about a soft closure of unnecessary offices. They don't define it here. You'll see later that what they mean is any office that helps immigrants, they want to close it. Okay, that's basically it. And we'll show you as we go through the video. Restructuring and redistribution of career personnel. So they're saying here that if you've got someone riding a desk, someone who's working behind a desk, instead they should be out arresting migrants. They should be arresting unlawful immigrants and getting them deported, getting them into the court system. Again, it's like a pie in the sky thing, like, oh yeah, we could do this and save money and redistribute personnel, but they're not gonna, they'll quit. Nobody wants to go out and arrest immigrants. That's why CBP and ICE are some of the agencies with the lowest morale. It's because their job sucks. Restructuring, okay, we talked about that. They want to tie grants and funding to compliance with immigration law, and so they want to force a local government to use their police to enforce immigration law, or they're not going to get, for the state, the whole state won't be able to get federal grants for, and that federal emergency management dollars. So if there's a hurricane or something, that state, if they're not in compliance with sharing all their data and sharing their police force to enforce immigration law, they might lose out on that. So they're trying to control the reins of local government by fiat. All right. Here we get into some more of the technical stuff, right? Right now, as it is, the director of USCIS or director of DHS can make more visas available in certain categories. So they want to make it clear that they won't use the secretary's discretionary authority to increase the number of H-2B, which are seasonal non-agricultural workers, above the statutorily set cap. So that you can see they're starting to limit the number of visas that they want to give out. This is just for the H-2Bs. When we talk about U.S. Customs and Border Protection, if all agencies are not merged, they want to consolidate ICE and CBP. Okay, two of the immigration police forces, one whose job is to guard the border, one whose job it is to arrest unlawful migrants inside the United States. They say that's going to just solve a lot of problems. Again, there's a lot of ifs to that. Here we go. CBP, follow along here on the right. CBP, ICE, and USCIS all have the authority to issue notices to appear to removable aliens in their presence, which begins removal proceedings. In most instances, CBP should turn illegal aliens over to ICE for detention, and ICE can then issue any needed NTA. And you can see I sort of circled that because as an immigration attorney, what do we know already happens? CBP turns people over to, actually CBP can issue their own NTA for someone entering the country. And it's saying CBP should issue NTAs only in limited situations for humanitarian reasons, such as medical emergencies. Now, how are you going to give someone an NTA? So NTA is a notice to appear. It starts the immigration court process. So someone crossing the border, if they say, hey, I want asylum, they'll pass a preliminary interview, and then they're given an NTA. They're given a notice to go to court. Now, the government has a computer system set up to do this. Under the Trump administration, they shut it down. They said, no, we don't want to have to do this, so we're just going to stop. And what it did is it caused a bunch of chaos, because what they did is Border Patrol would say, we're going to send you to immigration court at a time and place that we'll tell you about later. And by the time they were trying to tell them about where to go, there was this chaos. Like, nobody knew where the immigrant was. They couldn't get a hold of him. They didn't have an address. And that affected the official starting of the immigration court process. So it caused a lot of chaos on the government side. In fact, it allowed immigration attorneys to file a Pereira motion, which says, hey, the NTA actually wasn't officially an NTA, so they didn't officially start counting their unlawful presence in the United States because the NTA hadn't begun. And there was a lot of stuff that went into that. So a lot of courts had, they were sued, the government was sued, and the court said, why don't they just turn that system back on and start the NTA that has a legitimate date, time, and place for a court hearing, so they know right away. So this is, essentially what we're doing here is that Ken Cuccinelli is complaining about having lost that battle. So he says, ICE should be the only one handing out NTAs, notices to appear, to start the immigration process, and Border Patrol should only do it in limited situations for humanitarian reasons such as medical emergencies. Why are you going to send someone to court over a medical emergency? Ken, it doesn't make a lot of sense, buddy. Let's look here. In addition, CBP should eliminate use of notices to report altogether. All right. Now, there are let's see, transportation standards. What do we got? National standards for that. Let's go on to something more urgent, something more that's going to affect people on a day-to-day basis, instead of just thinking about how they're going to want to change things for everyone. Congress should increase funding for facility upgrades at strategic land ports of entry, including expanding state-of-the-art technology, such as non-intrusive inspection equipment. Okay, yeah, let's get rid of fentanyl. Of course, that was part of the last immigration bill that was going through Congress, and Trump stopped. He told all of his Republicans to stop that. Obviously, we want to fight the cartels. Nobody wants fentanyl getting into the U.S. We want to stop drug traffickers. I don't think there's anybody on any side of the political aisle who's going to argue about that. And now let's talk about ICE. Okay, ICE has increasingly been tasked with auxiliary missions that have little or nothing to do with immigration or customs. Sure. All right, so here's what they're going to do, right? Order ICE to stop closing out pending immigration cases. So right now, there's millions of cases in immigration court. You don't have millions of immigration judges or prosecutors or people to handle it, right? So what happens is ICE and the prosecutors that work for ICE have the opportunity now to administratively close a case. So if somebody doesn't have a criminal record, if they've lived here for a while, they've got family connections, they're being productive, they're staying out of trouble, they have the option in many cases to just close that case and say, look, we don't have time for you. We're either going to administratively close it, which means we're just not going to have any more hearings. In the future, we can if we need to, but for now, we're not going to. So that's administrative closure. Or termination of the case is where they say, you know what, we know where you live, just don't get any more trouble. We got to move on to the criminals. We got to prosecute and remove the criminals here. So we're prioritizing them over you. Have a nice day. Don't do anything bad. Okay? But they want to stop that. Of course, there's money reasons that they have to stop it and manpower reasons, right? There's not enough money that the federal government has allocated to removal systems. There's not enough judges. There's not enough immigration courts. There's not enough immigration prosecutors to handle it. Okay, it's just too much. And pretty much everybody who deals with it knows it, and it's not a secret. Like, if you work at the immigration court, you know this. If you're an immigration prosecutor, if you work for the OPLA or the ICE Chief Counsel, you know this. There's so many cases, and you can only do so much. So administrative closure was used as a tool to kick out the worst of the worst, okay? The worst people that we don't want around at all. They want to direct ICE to stop ignoring criminal aliens identified through the 287G program. Okay, controversial a little bit. Somebody gets picked up for a criminal offense. ICE can come and pick them up. ICE can, if the local police department sends a fax or an email or a message, or they call ICE and say, hey, we got someone who's undocumented, do you want them? ICE will take a look and say, well, let's see their name, date of birth, etc. They'll check their criminal databases, and they'll either say, yeah, hold on to that guy or gal. We will come and pick them up, and we're going to put them back into immigration court, or we're just going to deport them because they've already been deported. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about 287G. Now, it's very controversial because, again, you're using a local police department to enforce federal immigration law. And a lot of times what happens is somebody's caught for driving without a license, minor offense of disturbing the peace, something minor, and now it leads to a family separation. So a lot of people don't like that. And it's kind of inconvenient for a family, especially if you want to unite families on this side of death's door, okay? In the world, if we should have families united, maybe we need to take a look at that. However, there are immigrants who have been arrested. Immigration says, yeah, we'll come pick them up, but the police department doesn't hold on to them. And then if that migrant goes and commits a crime like a murder, oof, you're never going to hear the end of it, because that's serious. Or if they commit a rape or sexual abuse or a DUI and kill someone, right? That is a danger to the community, and it's not very popular. Nobody likes that. Now, you can look at the numbers and say, well, statistically, it's more Americans that are going to do these things anyway, etc. But politically, it doesn't play out that way. So the Trump administration is going to prioritize getting immigration detainers on anyone who's caught up for any offense. So for all my friends out there who are driving without papers, right? If you're an undocumented migrant and you're driving a car and you think it's cool to have fuzzy dice hanging in the mirror, don't. If you think it's awesome to have tinted windows and that tint is unlawful in your state, pull those puppies off. You don't want to get caught with that. Because any reason the police can pull you over could lead to your detention, arrest, and now deportation from the United States. And it's not worth a pair of fuzzy dice in the mirror just to be cool. All right, so they want to stop ignoring criminal aliens identified through 287G. So you're going to see more immigration detainers. You're going to see ICE picking people up. You're going to see immigration courts filling up again because of these simple things. From a practitioner's perspective, this means you're going to have more open immigration court cases. And now, without the possibility of administrative closure in many cases. Looking at the next point here, they want to eliminate T visas and U visas. Now, this is the stupidest proposal I think Ken Cuccinelli could imagine. And I don't know what anecdote he heard or what nonsense he heard, but they have had it out for anyone with a U visa or trying to get a U or T visa. Okay? A U visa is a visa that's available to someone who's suffered an extreme hardship due to being the victim of a crime. And it's not just any crime. It has to be a serious crime. Not a simple assault like a bar fight. We're talking about like if you're assaulted with a gun, if you're shot, if you're beat over the head with a steel tube or a baseball bat, if you've been kidnapped or you're being extorted or blackmailed, if you were the victim of witness tampering, right? So you're the witness in a case and you're being threatened by the other party. All of these things are awful. And so as a public policy, Congress years ago decided we want anyone to help the police in this situation. We want them to be able to feel free to come to the police and say, hey, there's a rapist out there, please arrest them. I'll testify, even though I don't have papers. Now, the benefit to the migrant is that they can apply for a U visa. It's not an automatic grant of a visa, it's an application process. There's only 10,000 of these visas available per year, and right now there's like a 10 or 12 year backlog. So it's no bed of roses to be applying for a U visa, but now they want to do away with it altogether. So what you could see is the immigrant community, once again, climbing up, right? There's a drive-by shooting in the neighborhood, a migrant's house gets shot up, they know who it is, but when the police come by asking questions, if the U visa doesn't exist, that migrant is going to be much more likely to say, yo no sé nada. I don't know anything. Because they don't want to have to give their name, date of birth, social security number, immigration status to a local police officer if they know that that's going to lead to them as a victim being taken to jail and put in immigration proceedings to be deported. So that's the U visa. Now the T visa, okay, we need to turn this clip into a short. This clip is so important. It's important that America knows that Project 2025, the outline for the Trump administration, their immigration policy is going to include a provision to eliminate visas for victims of human sex trafficking and victims of human labor trafficking. If there's one point in all of the 2025 plan I could reverse, it would be this, right? Don't eliminate the T visa and U visa, expand them. Don't limit it to 10,000 visas a year. Limit it to however many people actually qualify so that they can help make our communities stronger. So we can put criminals into prison. So we can put sex traffickers and labor traffickers into prison forever. Okay, and I know this was a big thing with QAnon and with, these movies about, busting up sex trafficking rings. You're getting rid of the visas that are protecting the victims. That's important to know. This needs to be heard by everybody in the world. Okay? What else do they want to do? Issue clear guidance regarding the detention and bond for aliens. Okay, there is clear guidance. This already exists. There's a statute that talks about mandatory detention, 237C. INA 237C says who can get bond and who cannot get bond. Now, bond, in immigration court context, when it's not mandatory detention, then the judge has the option of setting a bond, and it sets limits for how low or how high the bond technically could be. It's in the hands of a judge already. I don't know what else they would want to do there. They certainly wouldn't want to make it more available. I think they want to increase detention and decrease bonds that are given to migrants, just from reading through this. Okay, Republicans, conservatives, those who wrote Project 2025 have a problem with the student and exchange visitor program. A lot of this is in the hands of universities and ICE officials dealing with giving student visas to individuals who want to come to the U.S. to study. They're probably upset about the whole 9/11 thing, right? A lot of the 9/11 hijackers were on a valid student visa. Okay, so we can't really blame them for wanting to change that, but it looks like they want to eliminate or reduce significantly the number of visas issued to foreign students from enemy nations. Okay, who's an enemy nation? That's the next thing, right? All right, moving on to the next question here. Still dealing with ICE. Homeland Security Investigation Special Agents should enforce Title 8 and 18 crimes as the biggest part of their portfolio. Okay, so here, they want to enforce the crimes dealing with alien smuggling, trafficking, and cross-border crime, but they want to remove the T visa as a tool for them to use. The role of ICE deportation officers should be clarified. So inside of ICE, you have ERO, Enforcement and Removal Operations. And they are the ones who are the police who actually remove people. They take immigrants, they force them to come into interviews, make sure they bring a passport, buy them a ticket, or make sure they bring their own ticket. They put them on a plane. They're the ones who physically remove people from the United States. They should be identified as being primarily responsible for enforcing civil immigration regulations, including the civil arrest, detention, and removal of immigration violators anywhere in the United States. Now, they have anywhere in italics, so we got to put extra emphasis on the word anywhere. And they add without warrant where appropriate. So they should be able to arrest people without a warrant, which otherwise we could consider a constitutional law violation of the Fourth Amendment, subject only to the civil warrant requirements. All right, let's add some light here. Okay, we're back. Now, let's start that section again. The role of ICE deportation officers should be clarified. ICE enforcement and removal operations should be identified as being primarily responsible for enforcing civil immigration regulations, including the civil arrest, detention, and removal of immigration violators anywhere in the United States. Now they put anywhere in italics, so we have to add emphasis there. There's meaning behind what they say when they say anywhere. Without warrant, where appropriate, they say. So we don't want to have to go to the local judge and get a warrant for arrest, which is a violation of the Constitution. Subject only to the civil warrant requirements of the INA where appropriate, which means in the Immigration and Nationality Act, an ICE officer can write up a warrant and say, there's a migrant and I want to go arrest them. They can't use that to enter into someone's house. Okay? They need a warrant from a judge to open the door and go into someone's dwelling. In public, with the civil arrest warrant, they've made many arrests. Okay? They can arrest migrants, immigrants, and they do. But what they really want is to be able to bust into houses. And so that's why they have emphasis on anywhere in the United States here, without warrant where appropriate. Not great. All ICE memoranda identifying sensitive zones where ICE personnel are prohibited from operating should be rescinded and rely, oh, this is laughable, rely on the good judgment of officers in the field to avoid inappropriate situations. Okay, so what are these safety zones? We're talking about churches, schools, courtrooms, probation appointments, but churches, schools, places where they hold like a public parade or public events, things like that, where usually you wouldn't go to arrest people. It's essentially anywhere that we might want to hold sacred as a society. They want to be able to go into your church and take out all the immigrants. They want to be able to go into your school and take out all the kids who are immigrants who don't have papers. That's terrible. That's abusive, and it's going to be traumatic for a lot of kids. And the laughable part, right, just rely on the good judgment of officers in the field. I've met officers in the field. Their judgment is terrible. That's why they work for ICE, okay? And their job, let's be honest, their job sucks. When you're tasked with ripping people out of society and getting them out of the country, when you know it's going to ruin their family, it's going to traumatize them, it may ruin their life, it may turn them into a sex slave in their home country, you got to hate yourself. And the job sucks. I don't know why people do it. So they want to get rid of all the sensitive zones, which is terrible. All right, to maximize the efficient use of its resources, ICE should make full use of existing expedited removal authorities. Okay, all right, now let's talk about expedited removal. Let's talk about expedited removal. So if somebody is found within 100 miles of the border and they've been in the U.S. for less than a certain number of days, right? You can use, immigration will use expedited removal in order to just, you don't get a court hearing, you don't get any due process, it's just we found you, you've not been here long, and they physically remove them from the United States, and they do give them a removal order. They get a deportation order, which on it will say you're banned from getting a visa or coming to the U.S. for 5 years. After 5 years, if you've been gone for 5 years, you can apply for a waiver and a visa, and maybe you can come back, right? But as a practical matter, this is limited right now to, in the Immigration and Nationality Act, I did a little research a little while ago on this, and it's within 2 years. So 2 years is the maximum. If immigration finds you in the U.S. within 100 miles of the border, and you can't prove that you've been here for 2 years, they can expeditiously remove you. Right? They can just give you a deportation order. It's cheap. It's effective for the government. They just pick you up. They just yank you from wherever they find you. You don't go to court. You don't get an attorney. You're gone. So they want to expand the use of that. They want to take that past that 100-mile border. They want to expand it beyond the 2-year limitation that exists so that we don't have to put people in immigration court. Now, the problem with that is this. Someone who's been in the U.S. for a certain amount of time, and especially once you get to that 10-year mark, an immigrant can request cancellation of removal, but they have to do it in immigration court. And they can't do it if they're being expeditiously removed from the United States. So you're denying them an opportunity that exists under the law. So that's a problem. But again, this is what they want to take a hammer fist to immigration enforcement and do whatever they can to increase enforcement. Now here's a little part here. This part down here, the use of what they call Blackie's warrants. Okay, now Blackie's is not a racist term. This has to do with the name of a restaurant that was raided multiple times. Now I did look this up. So the first time, immigration, they picked up somebody who was working at Blackie's restaurant. And they said, yeah, I worked there. I work with a bunch of other immigrants. And ICE was like, well, if you work there and you don't have papers and all these other people work there and they don't have papers, we should go to a judge, get a warrant, and we should arrest all the people who don't have papers, and then we can just deport them all at once. Hey, that's a great idea. So that's what they did. Except when they filled out the warrant form, they messed up the first time, right? It was essentially a form they used, and they forgot to change the word from property to people. And so eventually the court struck that warrant down and said, no, that one was unlawful. They went back and got a second warrant where they custom typed it, right? They custom typed that request, and they asked for the permission to go into the commercial premises, the restaurant, and arrest anybody who doesn't have papers. The court approved that. They went in, they did that. So now the use of Blackie's warrants is what we call a warrant that ICE will get to go to a business unannounced in many cases. Usually, no, always unannounced. They'll get it from the court, and then they'll run down and arrest as many people as they can at their place of employment. So they want to operationalize that within ICE. Now they call them a civil search warrant. They say it's used for worksite enforcement. The research I did indicates that it's not one that they can actually write on their own. They need to go to a judge, or at least the one in the Blackie's case. They had to go to a judge and get approval for that. But that's one more thing they want to do. They want to make it impossible to work for unlawful individuals. Congress should mandate and fund additional bed space for alien detainees. Okay, so they want to expeditiously remove everyone, but they also want unlimited bed space, or daily bed space to be 100,000. They want to be able to detain people at the border at a much higher level. Here's the problem. Under the Trump administration, when they were detaining more people at the border, what we saw was massive abuse. Physical abuse of detainees, sexual abuse of detainees, rape of detainees and children. And they would actually, I have a client who they put in what they called the freezer, right? So it was a small room. They crank the air conditioner way up so it's uncomfortable, and they say, hey, just tell us whenever it is you want to get deported. You're going to sit in here until then. And so they got a lot of people to give up their right to go to immigration court or to request asylum, because they were literally putting them in a situation of torture. Like, and I know one might say, oh, poor things, they were in air conditioning. No, but they were in air conditioning for hours at a time, where it was like super cold, and so they started shaking, and that's not nice. It's just a bad thing. So I think we can expect to see more of that if they get their way and raise the number of bases available for detaining migrants. Here we see Congress should fund ICE for at least 20,000 ERO officers and 5,000 Office of the Principal Legal Advisor attorneys. Won't be enough, I tell you that much. You're going to need a lot more people than that. And good luck finding quality individuals to fill those roles. Because the people who are going to fill those roles are going to be the sadists. They're going to be the ones who say, oh, I love causing chaos, or I'm actually a superhero by ripping families apart. I'm serving my country. Give me a break. All right. We're going to pause here, and then we'll move on to USCIS. 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 Now they're throwing this all at the feet of the Biden administration. They're saying the USCIS's policies have been misaligned. And essentially what they're saying here is USCIS has been busy trying to help people stay in the US instead of just with blinders on, reviewing documents and saying, yes, you can stay, or no, you have to go. Yes, this is approved. No, you're not approved. That's their vision for USCIS as part of immigration enforcement. Now, look here, USCIS should be returned to operating as a screening and vetting agency. Regulatory efforts have focused on easing asylum eligibility. Well, I'll tell you right now, asylum is a mess. eligibility for asylum, especially when we're talking about what is a particular social group, it's poorly defined. It's a frustration for immigrants and immigration attorneys everywhere. You have judges that apply it far differently all across the United States. And so it's a very legally nuanced situation, right? It makes it difficult to predict whether you're going to win or lose a case. But one thing that has happened, because there is a whole court system within immigration, and then it's reviewed by the circuit courts and then the Supreme Court, it was determined by the immigration court system that, yeah, if you're a victim of domestic violence in your home country and you can't get out of your relationship, so say you're in an abusive marriage and you can't escape it and you've tried but it didn't work and you tried and it didn't work, then if you come to the US to escape that, yeah, you're the member of a particular social group, and that social group is, spouses who are in an abusive relationship that can't get out, and that in certain countries the legal framework doesn't exist to protect them. So that was determined. When Trump became president, Jeff Sessions became the Attorney General and had the authority to and did override those cases. Okay, so he said, no. Domestic violence, no. And then there was another one that talked about gang activity, right? Young men and young women were being abused by and recruited by gangs in the Northern Triangle in Central South America, okay? And there were some cases that came out that said, yeah, if this happens, that could be considered part of a social group. And again, he said no, and they reversed a bunch of those decisions. So again, they want to unreverse those. They just want to pull a Uno reverse card and undo a lot of those things on day one as well. They're complaining here about USCIS being used to create a parole program, this Biden parole program that tried to get implemented and then was stopped. They're complaining about that. Of course, things like TPS, DACA, they complain about those. They want to do away with TPS. They say that's supposed to be temporary, but it's gone on for like over 20 years for some cases. So TPS should only be used temporarily. So they want to get rid of that. And there's millions of people on TPS in the United States. So if that doesn't get renewed, all of a sudden you're going to flood immigration courts with all of those individuals as well, because they've been here 10 years, and now they can request what's called cancellation of removal. So you're going to need a way to deal with that strategically and not just say from one day to the other, we're going to rip the Band-Aid off and we're just going to do our part, because you're going to flood the immigration courts with it. You don't have the manpower to handle that. Let's see here. Right, and of course they're not happy about DACA still. Now, the Fraud Detection and National Security Directorate, the FDNS, this is the group inside of USCIS whose job it is to find cases where fraud is happening. Here they say it doesn't happen enough and they need to do it more, and later they say they should get rid of it or realign it or something. It's just a little schizophrenic the way they're dealing with FDNS here. Oh, look, they want to re-implement the USCIS denaturalization unit. So once you go through the whole immigration process and you've got your citizenship, they want the Department of Immigration to go after people and try and take it away then, right? So it's like a never-ending game of cat and mouse in some situations. Denaturalization can already happen. If someone's arrested for terrorism, if somebody's arrested for immigration fraud, and they go through the federal court system, they can have their naturalization, their citizenship, taken away because of that. So I don't know what Ken's talking about here. They want a criminal enforcement component within the agency. Okay. Let's see here. Public charge rule. Look at this. This is going to rear its ugly head again. So under the Trump administration, they implemented a new interpretation of the public charge rule. And what that means is if somebody wants to get a visa to enter the United States, they have to prove that they're not a public charge, or in other words, that they're not going to be a drain on public resources in the United States, that they're not coming in just to get welfare. They're not coming in just to get welfare or to get money from the government. That's already the law. Okay? In order for someone to immigrate, they need a financial sponsor. That financial sponsor signs a document that says, if they can't support themselves, I'll support them. And if they go to the government for support, I'll reimburse the government. So this already exists, but what they did last time, and what we can expect again, is to take it to the next level and say, tell you what, from the get-go, if you want to come to the US, you have to prove that you're not a financial burden. You also have to show us a credit report, which maybe doesn't even exist for you because you don't live here. You have to show us your bank account balance. You have to show us all of the education levels you've achieved and any certificates and doctorates or degrees you've earned. You also have to show us it's this and that and the other. They listed off a ton of evidence, like, have you ever filed for bankruptcy? Do you have any debt? Do you have any credit card? All these things, which are just unnecessary and caused further delays with USCIS, they want to re-implement. So they want their public charge rule to go back into effect. Let's hope they don't succeed. Let's see here. Okay, USCIS has utilized other policy and internal procedural mechanisms to extend employment authorization to large groups of people who are in the country without legal status. That is just not true. If you don't have any legal status in the US, you don't get a work permit. In order to apply with the form for a work permit, you have to put in the code under the law that qualifies you to receive it. They want a complete audit of agency policies and memorandum, so they want to completely undo everything that the last administration did. New policies, right? Again, they're just talking about re-merging these, delineation of authorities, use of deferred action, issuance of NTAs, we talked about that. Here we go, the Trump administration's public charge rule, they want to re-implement that. Now, here's another part that for immigration attorneys or anyone preparing their own application, you're going to want to know this. While Trump was president, they implemented a new policy almost overnight that said if you submit any application and there's any blank field on it, it's going to be rejected. It'll be sent back to you. You don't get a chance to correct it. It's just rejected. We're not even going to look at it. So you lose any processing time. You lose anything. You know, if you've got to wait a year and you've been at 11 months and they reject it, well, you got to start over again. So as a technicality on many forms for immigration, in the instructions, you'll see it says, hey, if something doesn't apply or if this doesn't apply, just write NA in the field. The practice for the last 30 years has been we could just leave it blank. If something didn't apply, we could leave the field blank. And many attorneys now, again, have gone back to that practice because under the Biden administration, they made it a common sense approach again. But what they're saying right here is USCIS should enforce existing regulations by rejecting incomplete applications and petitions, ensuring both that they are completed before accepted for filing and that FDNS signs off on all approved applications and petitions. So they want to reject your forms if it doesn't have that NA filled in again. So you got to start doing that. Now, we also own a software company for immigration professionals, and we have a little tool built in because when they came out with that rule, we said, well, if there's anything blank, put an NA in it. So we make that automatic in our software. Prima.law, if you're interested. Here we go. Other efforts should be focused on adjudication standards, returning to nearly 100% interview requirements for all appropriate cases. Okay, so if you've petitioned for your mom and you've already proved by a birth certificate and evidence that she is your mom and biologically, you meet all the requirements, now it's time for her to get her green card. They're going to say, oh, well, you should have an interview then again. Of course, in the interview, all the interviewer does is waste about an hour going over the questions, which are usually fine. And the only real reason for holding the interview is to say, are you really their mom, or are they really your son? And how many hours of work or time do you waste by doing that? So previous to Trump the last time, after Trump, they relaxed that requirement saying, hey, in cases of marriages, yeah, need an interview to make sure it's a legitimate marriage. In cases of getting a green card based on a U visa, not necessary because their legitimacy, their eligibility has already been determined, not necessary. So USCIS had discretion to say, yeah, we need to invest more time in this case, but not in this case with an actual interview. But they want to go back to interviews for all applications, which is going to further slow things down. We're going to be losing efficiency. I don't know, if Elon Musk or Vivek Ramaswamy ever sees this video, I want them to understand that Project 2025 is the opposite of efficiency in immigration. And there's some smart things they can do to say, you know what? We don't need to interview every single person. We don't need to interview every parent and child. We don't need to interview every single case and waste hours and hours and hours of time and manpower. All right, so let's keep looking here. Creating a merit-based, okay, here we go. The incoming administration should create a merit-based immigration system. Okay, it's a tall task. Could you do it? Sure. Is it going to be good? Possibly. We want the best people coming to the U.S., of course. But we also need, workers. We need blue-collar workers. We need agricultural workers. We need all sorts of people. I fear to see what happens to food prices if we lose everybody who's working in the fields. There's a need for that in the United States. We need agricultural workers. Robots have not taken over that job yet. Now, is it true that we also need bright, wealthy, well-educated individuals to fill jobs? Sometimes. The thing is, there's already a system in place for giving employment visas. And there's a system in place to make sure that an employer is checking with the U.S. Department of Labor and proving that they can't find workers in these categories or for these jobs before they petition for a migrant to take that spot. That already exists. So when we talk about a merit-based immigration system, I'd be curious to know what their merits are that they're talking about. Rewards high-skilled aliens instead of the current system. Well, what if we've got a lot of high-skilled Americans who we don't have enough doctor jobs or engineering jobs for, or things like that? Now, I don't know that that's the case. Maybe it's not. Maybe we need more engineers. Maybe we need all these things. But there's already a process in place to petition for them. They're just very slow and inefficient. If we could speed them up, if we could modernize it, you're not going to need a rewrite of all the immigration laws for that, as fun as that might be. They want to eliminate the diversity visa lottery system. So they want to eliminate a program established by USCIS in order to award visas from countries where we have fewer immigrants because we believe in diversity. But that has the diversity word in it, so it's unpopular. So they want to get rid of that visa. And they want to award visas only to the best and brightest. I don't know if they're going to make them take an IQ test or what to determine who is the best and brightest. Here you can see they want to repeal TPS designations, permanently authorize and make mandatory E-Verify, which has its own problems, end parole abuse by legislating specific parole standards. There are parole standards. There is discretion given to USCIS, but they want to end any program of parole that would help a large number of people in the U.S. already. That's what their goal is there. They're saying that USCIS is primarily fee-funded. Yes, you're welcome. It's immigrants that are paying the costs of DHS and of USCIS. Although for some reason they think they're not paying enough. Now USCIS runs a surplus. They have money that the government takes from USCIS to fund other things like border walls. Okay? But they're saying here, Ken Cuccinelli is saying, oh, fees should be increased agency-wide to keep in step with inflation and the true costs of adjudications. So even though they're already running profits, which means the fees they're charging, financially speaking, are too high, right? Because if you're bringing in more money than the agency needs, that means you're funding the agency and then some, so you could afford to cut the fees to the immigrants. But here he throws it around and he says, no, instead we should increase fees no matter what. We should create a fee for asylum seekers. We should limit the availability of fee waivers, which already exists. There's a special form you got to fill out if you want a fee waiver. Implement a fee for asylum applications. So the people who are escaping persecution and death in their home country now need to come up with a fee to file an application to follow the law here. You're going to get more people trying to sneak in, right? They're going to try and avoid the whole thing altogether because it's become too bureaucratic and then it's going to be too expensive. Now USCIS in some employment applications, they have what's called premium processing, which means you can pay an extra $1,000 or an extra fee and they'll work extra fast on your application. And if they don't finish it on time, then they refund your fee, right? But they're saying, oh, this is another way we can make money. Okay, a family petition takes 12 months now. It used to take 3. A provisional waiver takes 42 months today. It used to take more, and before it used to only take 1 to 3 months to be approved. Okay, so the problem here isn't premium processing or sucking more money from an immigrant in order to fix the system. You need to just fix the system. Here we go. All applicants rejected for any benefit or status adjudication should be required to leave the U.S. immediately. There's already a notice on the rejection notices that say, hey, any documents you have expire and you need to leave the U.S. Apparently they want to make more strict enforcement of that. Now look, here's a tricky little provision that Ken put in here. USCIS should pause the intake of applications in a benefit category when backlogs in that category become excessive. Okay? Literally every category of visa applications are backlogged due to Trump being president last time and COVID and the shutdowns and just poor management at USCIS all around. So if Trump is going to follow this to the letter, we can expect that they'll just straight up stop accepting applications. Now, I don't think they have statutory authority to stop accepting applications, but I'll bet they try. They'll say, no, there's too many applications pending right now. It's already taken us a year to approve these. Everybody has to wait. Or no, there's too many waivers pending. We're not even going to accept any now. You got to just wait until we say you can file it again. And that's just going to create more backlogs. It's not a solution. It's not even a Band-Aid. It's just making the situation worse. But it's a backdoor way to stop all immigration. Okay, now we go on to unaccompanied minors. They want to repeal the provisions for special immigrant juvenile status, or SIJS. All unaccompanied children may be returned to their home countries in a safe and efficient manner. Well, the government's not good at doing either of those things. And if there's an unaccompanied minor who shows up at the U.S. border, usually it's because it's not safe in their home country. And as part of the SIJS process to get them status in the United States, they go to a family court in the U.S., and that judge will determine if it's in the best interest of the child to return to their home country or not. And only with that legal determination from a local judge, from a state judge in family court or probate court, only then can they request a visa from USCIS. So it's misguided to say, oh, let's just repeal that part of the law. No, it exists for a reason. You got an unaccompanied minor who's found in the United States, and you want to just deport them without knowing who they belong to, where their address is, whether they were being, abused nonstop before they came. It's madness. And the Flores settlement agreement. Okay, so certain standards have to be met when housing migrants. Okay, the government was sued because of it, and they entered into a settlement agreement in order to establish certain standards. And Trump last time said, well, I just want to do away with that. I want to get out of that settlement. Legally, you can't. It's a legal settlement. It has the force of law. So they want to just end it. So they talk about wanting to end it here, but it's not something they can do all on their own. So it's purely here for propaganda purposes. Detention of children, yeah, of course they want to do that. Asylum reform, okay, they want to change the standards for a credible fear interview. They want to codify former asylum bars and third country transit rules. Okay, so if you came to the U.S. through a third country, they're going to force you to go back to that country and request asylum there. So anyone from Guatemala had to go through Mexico. Well, now the court would say, well, you got to go to Mexico and request asylum there, even though your life might be in just as much danger or more as a migrant in Mexico. Congress should eliminate the particular social group protected ground as vague and overbroad. Well, it is vague, but it does serve a purpose. And it would be nice to have some standards more clearly defined for it. But what they're trying to do here is just eliminate one more possibility for people to enter the United States. And the particular social group language, you need to amend the statute to get rid of that. So if Congress, the Senate, the Senate and the House and the President agreed, that could become a change in the law, but it requires a change in law. And again, like we talked about gang violence, domestic violence, they're saying those aren't grounds for asylum and we don't want them to be. They want parole reform. They want to reintroduce the migrant protection protocols or the wait in Mexico policy, right, where somebody comes to the border and they say, nope, we don't want to deal with you today. Go back and wait there. We'll call your number when we're ready. And in the meantime, people were being kidnapped and abused by cartels in Mexico, because the cartels realized, oh, we've got a bunch of people here. They're poor. They can't say anything about it. Let's go take advantage of them. So it caused a whole other group of problems. But they want to reintroduce those things. Yeah, they want to limit work authorization, which, like I pointed out, it already is severely limited. It's not, everyone doesn't just get a work permit. But what they want to do is, even among the people who get it legally, they want to take that away again, which just causes more problems, right? What do you think people are going to do for money if they can't work legally in the United States? Well, they're going to turn to crime, or they're going to work illegally. Okay, so you're making the situation worse. Let's see here, prosecutorial, they want to get rid of prosecutorial discretion. They want to eliminate the detention, that they may be detained. They want to make it mandatory detention. So they don't want any immigrant to be able to get out on bond in immigration court or when they're crossing the border. They want everybody to be detained and quickly removed. That's the point here. And we already talked about T visa and U visa reform. There were a couple other points I wanted to talk about here. Of course, we talked about that. Here we go. All right. The Office of Citizenship and Immigration Services Ombudsman should be eliminated. This is their proposal. Okay, so if I have a client and we file a petition for them and it doesn't get any attention, we get no notices, we think maybe it got lost in the mail, but we can prove it arrived at the office, but nothing's happening on it. Currently, the Ombudsman Office, we can contact them and say, hey, we may have gotten lost in the shuffle, but it's been a year and they haven't moved on this at all. This needs to happen. This is an emergency, families suffering here, whatnot. That works for us. We've had cases that get movement only because of that. A congressman, again, can contact the Ombudsman Office. So if you have a constituent who, again, needs their citizenship or needs a visa petition approved or a parole request reviewed, they can go to their congressman and say, hey, can you help us? The congressman's staff will contact the Ombudsman Office. The proposal is to get rid of the Ombudsman's office. That doesn't make any sense. Why would you get rid of something that helps keep the gears of the government moving when otherwise they wouldn't? Right? They say the DHS bureaucracy is too large, Secretary has too many direct reports, their policy functions can be performed by OIG and GAO, they cannot. The specialized casework can be moved into USCIS as a special unit. No, because it's USCIS who's usually the problem. If you call the customer service number for USCIS, you get zero help. That's not the Ombudsman Office. My goodness. The specialized casework, blah, 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 blah. Okay, they want to prohibit the Ombudsman Office from assisting illegal aliens to obtain benefits. Currently, approximately 15 to 20% of the workload consists of helping DACA applicants renew, not obtain, because you can't get DACA for the first time anymore. You can only renew it, so I don't know why they put obtain there. Including work authorization. Okay, so there's a period of time where DACA applicants, they would file their renewal paperwork and it would take months and months and months for them to get their work permit when it should be automatic. Okay, so they would call the Ombudsman and the Ombudsman would say, hey, USCIS, let's do our job here. It's straightforward, just to prove it. And then it would work. So yeah, it's going to lead to more delays, it's going to lead to more frustration, it's going to lead to more lawlessness, more chaos. So not something we should be eliminating. And here, now the Department of Justice, they want to move, this is part of the blowing up DHS and reassembling the pieces. Well, one of those pieces they want to put into the new immigration service comes from the Department of Justice. It's the EOIR, Executive Office for Immigration Review, and that is Immigration Court. So they want Immigration Court to be part of the great big immigration agency that they want to increase, that they want to create and increase. Of course, there's other departments. Department of State has to deal with immigration. You can't move the Department of State to that. There's statutory problems with that. But there's some mean-spirited things here as well. So they want to deny loan access to those who are not U.S. citizens or green card holders. So if you have DACA and you want to get in-state tuition, they want to not provide student loans to any student at the school that's going to give you in-state tuition because you live in the state, right? You've lived there your whole life. Essentially, you're a DACA holder, so you're not a U.S. citizen. But they're saying if your school offers in-state tuition to you, and this goes back to a federal court case and a state court case as well, where schools were refusing to provide in-state tuition to in-state DACA holders. It was ruled unlawful. They want to undo that and deny loan access to any student at any school that provides in-state tuition to someone who has DACA. Yeah, so a lot of interesting stuff in this chapter. And again, for context, we're dealing with this document which is called Project 2025. Let's go back to the main page here. And of course, Project 2025 is the policy document published by the American Heritage Foundation, designed to be a guideline for the incoming Trump administration. As you can see, we're going to be dealing with a lot of the same problems we dealt with under the last Trump administration. Some of these things they've tried and were stopped by court. I can guarantee you they're going to try all of these things again. They may couch it differently. They may couch it as a regulation. They may try and pass a statute. So it will definitely need some fighting against in order to preserve rights and opportunities for immigrants that us as attorneys, we take care of and we care about. For you who are migrants or who have family members who are immigrants, this is going to be something you want to pay attention to as well as we go through the next 4 years. All right, I'm attorney James Betzel. My website is visafeliz.com. Our mission is to unite families through immigration here in the United States. We do that through lawful means. So we have an immigration practice where we've helped thousands of individuals obtain status here in the United States. I also own a software company, so for immigration attorneys or immigration professionals out there who prepare applications for clients, we have prima.law. You can go to www.prima.law and you can find a free 15-day trial there. But we have all the case types, all the immigration forms, checklists, a project management board so you can see which cases are progressing, which ones aren't. Easy to communicate with your clients via email, text message, and other forms as well. So go ahead and find us there at prima.law. All right. Thanks for watching today.